I got Nikita Yudin, is an ecosystem builder of Azerbaijan's innovation ecosystem. He's initiated the creation of 7 new tech communities in the country and is also the author of the strategy for the development of the gaming ecosystem in Azerbaijan. Well done, brother.
Welcome.
Give him love,
And
give him love.
next up is Dr. Dan Herman. Dan Herman, PhD is in the name. He's from Toronto, Canada. He was the head of innovation policy for the government of Canada, actually, and the CEO of the government of Ontario's Intellectual Property Agency. He's also a professor at the University of Toronto and an award-winning documentary producer, notably for his documentary, A People's War, about the war in Ukraine, and his series, Magnetic Cities on the World's Most Innovative Places. What an honor.
Yes.
Yes. And next we have Zhura Komatova. She's a senior expert in digital transformation and international cooperation with a proven track record of managing high-level ICT initiatives.
All right, welcome, welcome. Let's have a good panel. Give him love, baby, give him love.
Keep your ears sharp.
Oh, this is great. This is one of my favorite topics because it's something that I've spent many years doing on the private side, and so now we get to talk about it from the government angle and what you guys are doing inside of your ecosystems to build them out and what you're looking for in the policies that you're citing. So my first question is, why did you get into policy? Sana?
I think it's going to work.
Yeah.
Great. Hello to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And my name is Zhura Komatova. And to answer to your question, what is actually the main reason how we came to policy? It's because we are the part of GovTech, and we are working on the policy that should work for our citizens. I'm working at National Information Technologies Company, and we are providing the public services to our citizens, to our population. That is how we started not only to enable, but also to improve the policy that we have in the Republic of Kazakhstan.
Thank you. And Nikita, why did you choose this career path?
Okay, why on policy? I think there is 2 points. The first point, it is understanding. The second is changing. When you're working inside of ecosystem, at first you are thinking how government works, because government sometimes don't understand how they can support the ecosystem players, communities, etc. I started in community, and after when I entered in policy in government, I started changing government mindset for supporting community. That's why I'm in policy.
So my answer maybe is a little bit different. I started as an entrepreneur, and then I was building a research firm that focused on kind of why our economies were or weren't competitive. And one day I asked one of my clients, who is a government client, I asked them why they weren't doing anything that we were telling them to do. And they laughed at me and they said, well, maybe one day you should come into government and see kind of how and why things do and don't work. And so maybe by accident, I became a policymaker. But then ultimately, I think to your point, Nikita, the ability to help the founders who are doing things, because if founders are the lifeblood of our economy, or creators are the lifeblood of our economy, we need to make sure we've got an enabling atmosphere and context for them to succeed in. And the ability to help shape that, I think, is exceptionally exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. So Nikita, what is your favorite success story that's come out of your ecosystem development work?
Actually, we just started supporting gaming ecosystem in Azerbaijan now. I think that most maybe biggest success in the future. But in March in Baku, local studio, just 10 people, launched game in Steam, and in just 1 month, they made $500,000. Just in 1 month. I think that for Azerbaijan, maybe in global, it is maybe nothing, but for Azerbaijan, this is a great number. I think that for this moment, I think this is a big success for us, for our game ecosystem.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I've heard a quote before that maybe I made up, which is the highest form of policy is to make yourself obsolete. What do you think of that, Dan?
Absolutely. It's funny. I used to have a really big team of policymakers, and I'd say like our jobs are here because we have a problem. And if anything, like I had a big board in the office where we had every problem in our innovation economy, and more broadly, every problem in our economy we had on the big board. And our job was to figure out what can we do from a programmatic or a policy perspective to address each of these problems. The goal being that all of us are out of work in X years. And if I can steal a little bit on the question you asked Nikita, like I actually, we spent, I was the head of innovation policy for several years in Canada. We spent billions of dollars building really big programmatic initiatives. And the toughest part now is to look at them and say, hey, wait, they didn't work, right? The outcomes that we wanted didn't actually happen. And so then it's like, well, why not? And what do we go back to try to solve next time?
Yeah, that's interesting. Oh, wow. So Zura, what are you doing in your programs to make sure that you are not interfering with or you're helping to become obsolete and not interfering with the private sector and making them dependent?
Well, actually, we started not to make our own Silicon Valley, because the topic of today's session is not about being in fantasy, but making something real. So we started to make different innovation hubs all around the world, which is the regional hubs for startups and private companies of Central Asian region. Primarily, it's the Silk Road Innovation Hub in USA. It's also Al-Farabi Innovation Hub and some hubs in Saudi Arabia. But the main success that we're doing for now, by establishing our policies, we're creating the AI ecosystem. And in Kazakhstan, we are opening the National AI Center, which will be in the center of our city. It's called Alem AI. And if you have a chance, please visit Kazakhstan in October.
Okay.
Because we will hold a big event called Digital Bridge, when we are going to present our National AI Center.
Oh, yeah.
This center will actually support not only companies, but the children, because we will have the Tomorrow School program here on 2 floors. It will allow to children to come by shuttle buses from schools to the AI center, and they are the parts of big ecosystem that we are doing for now. And we are also providing the GovTech support here in the Alem AI, and also making the fairs for different companies from all around the world.
Oh yeah, that's great. You have great events in
Yes,
Kazakhstan,
that's
Digital
what we are
Almaty,
doing
and
for
then and also. So Nikita, why do you think the Caucasus region is uniquely suited for creative tech? Like why did you guys decide to focus on the games industry?
Good question. Actually, when I told about Azerbaijan, everyone said me, we know in Azerbaijan about oil and gas and maybe about F1 racing, just this. And we understand that we have full of talents, creative people, young people. They want to create anything, but our market in Azerbaijan is very small. We have just 10 million people. And to scaling any new technology in new times is a very difficult process. And I said, okay, we need maybe some vertical where we can scale everything, new technologies, maybe creative technologies around the world. What is vertical? This is gaming. Because you can create maybe any game, PC game, mobile game, Web3 games, blockchain games. You can create in Azerbaijan, and you can use, if it's PC games, you can use a Steam, Poki. If you use mobile gaming, you can use App Store, Play Market, and you can scale your great game around the world and you're gaining money. And we understand that for Azerbaijan, this is a very good opportunity to support a game industry, to help local studios to increase their revenue. And now we have started Game Dev Academy with Xola, in Azerbaijan. We started incubation program with Xsola in Azerbaijan too. And actually, we are every year organizing Game Summit event. This is one of the biggest game dev event in Central Asia in Caucasus region. Last year in Game Summit was 27,000 people, investors, publishers, and other companies. And now we are building ecosystem. Now we in processes of writing a government strategy of supporting of game industry, and now we in process of building a first game fund in Caucasus region, and opening a first publishing company in Azerbaijan. That's why.
Yeah, I think the Caucasus region, I think, is a pretty unique place for creative tech because you have such a great tech foundation just in the culture here, but then there's also creativity. So unlike other parts of the world that might have the creativity and no tech, or tech and no creativity, like you guys got both, so it's like a really great place to be. So Dan, what do you think that people who are in the private sector can do to help work with policymakers to build out their communities?
That's a great question. And you know, it's funny because it goes both ways. In government, we actually often lack empathy for people who are founders, who are building businesses. And vice versa, in the private sector, we often have individuals who bemoan the fact that policymakers just get in their way. And, you know, I think, Jessica, you're from the US, I'm from Canada, but we're still friends, I think. But in the US, there's the thought of kind of the revolving door, right? Where in certain sectors of the economy, people go from the private sector to the public sector and back and forth. And sometimes we look at that from a negative perspective, but actually what it builds is people who understand the challenges that policymakers have, and vice versa, the challenges of making payroll or of growing that founders have. And too often in our bureaucracies, we don't have those people. You know, I was at the relative top of a department of 2,500 people, and I think I could count 4 people who had real industry experience, and that was a real problem. And when I would go to meet companies, and when companies would come to my office, often it was they didn't understand the pressures that we as policymakers were under to meet, you know, a variety of different mandates, right? Because our mandates as policymakers weren't just about help this company grow, but they were about help this ecosystem grow, or help this sector grow, or help this specific region grow. And so, you know, where politics meets economics and political economy is, I think, such a foundational part of what policymakers do, but it's kind of foreign to anybody who's just building a business and who just needs to make money and sell stuff and build stuff. And so the more we can do in all of our ecosystems to get kind of multi-sport athletes, right? People who don't just understand one sport really well, but actually who understand different parts of an economy really well, I think that's what makes the most successful places in the world work really well.
Yeah, so the private and public sectors just really working with each other and learning from each other. That's interesting. So Jura, what kind of programs are you seeing inside of Kazakhstan that are actually working really well for you guys right now?
We started to make the national platform on AI, and NITEC has chosen and established as the national operator of such platform. When we decided to give an opportunity to private companies to be involved to the process of making AI projects in Kazakhstan. That means that the company actually can be in a client role and also in a customer role. Sometimes when it comes to the AI projects, you know that one of the big problems for the startups that they don't have any capacities.
Okay.
And government, it has such opportunities. It has infrastructure, it has data centers, GPUs and all that stuff, which can be provided to such companies. That's the model that we decided to do, to make new different solutions, because earlier when we have made the research market, we found out that actually 7 startups were doing the same. They were trying to make the CAS-LLM, but it was just a duplicating of data sets. What we decided to do, just to combine all of them and to give the opportunity to work together. It's one of the current examples that we're doing now. And also we're participating in GovStack program, which is under the ITU. through the GovTech, we planning to export our solutions to different countries, and the different policymakers can also be involved in the process of establishing what kind of solutions different countries need. And we're trying to meet their needs.
Yeah, that's interesting, trying to make sure that the companies that you're supporting inside of your ecosystem
on
are
the local,
duplicating
regional
efforts. Yeah.
levels.
Yeah, and make sure that there's a plan. There's a plan there. So what are you seeing working right now in Azerbaijan, Nikita? What types of programs and policies are you implementing?
I think that everything from policy side must be began from strategy. For government need transparent strategy for all ecosystem players. How government will support all studios, all ecosystem players in 5 years, and very important that this maybe end of the strategy that be that after 5 years the government will be exits from this process, because government, this is not ecosystem players. Government is enable, maybe a regulator, but not ecosystem player, and government create all opportunities, infrastructure, access to finance, maybe networking, etc. All opportunities. And after, when the government will see that, okay, I not need in this process because ecosystem built, ecosystem can save themselves, and I think that it is enough. When in Azerbaijan, when we started working with some ecosystem players, we say to them, guys, we support you in 1, 2, 3, 4 years, but we need to know that after the 3 years, you will go to the self-monetization. It's very important, I think.
Interesting. So Dan, what are you seeing that you've been involved in policy that's working well? Like from a policy's perspective, how do you setting up the funding and the grants and whatnot?
Yeah, and maybe I'm going to link this to a question you asked Nikita earlier about what's unique about the Caucasus region. And I'll be controversial. I spend a lot of my time traveling all over the world. I spend time in Africa and Southeast Asia and Latin America. And you actually see really vibrant innovation ecosystems, startup ecosystems in all of these places. And so what I think we see when we look at the data around these places is this is actually a big game of probability. And I'm an economist by training, so maybe that's why I lean this way. But what works is having the broadest pool of startups as possible. And so building a culture of entrepreneurship is step one. That it's great to have 10 startups, 50 startups, 100. What you need is as many as possible, because I've had 2 startups, both have failed, or one kind of succeeded, but one failed miserably. And that's really we know from the data that 80% fail. And so we need as broad of a pool as possible to start. So we need a culture of entrepreneurship on step one. And then we need a means of actually figuring out within this huge broad pool of startups, we give some a little bit of capital to start. And then we need to be really ruthless, as our friends in venture are, to cut people off and to actually double down on the ones that show the traction that they're winning markets. And often in government, because when you're a policymaker and you report maybe to a politician, the politician would like to get reelected. And so the politician might say to you, well, we want everyone to be happy. That's not my job. My job is to make sure that from a policy perspective, we aim at an outcome. The outcome is to have some winning companies and building an ecosystem that wins. And for that, we need to be selective. And we need to actually say, if you've got 50 companies who show traction in gaming, who are the 5 who actually have the attributes of being global champions? Because in this world where you have essentially 200 countries around the world have the ability to build globally competitive startups, how do they win? Government's got to get behind the ones who show the most traction to win. And while it's unpopular for politicians, as policymakers, we need to kind of double down on picking.
Yeah, because if not, you're going to end up with startups that are just absolutely require government support, and
that's it.
That's not really a ecosystem or economic development. That's
That's it.
That's welfare.
No, and that's it. We want ultimately, and we know that startups can be the engine of an economy, but they need to be independent engines of an economy. And so doing so means that we've got to seed them a little bit and then let them see who wins and loses. And then in a really competitive global economy, when we see the ones that are starting and we understand that some places are actually going to give them more support, each of us has to say, okay, we need to match that support and create a level playing field for these companies when they go into other markets.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, Zura, if you were to look at the other ecosystems around the world, obviously not yours, because that wouldn't be fair. What country or region have you seen have a really good economic policy and ecosystem development policy that you think would be useful to implement inside of your program?
Well, I have a big project with our South Korean partners, and to be honest, when we come to the Republic of Korea, they have done a lot of work in the fields of policy. And when I've been making some researches, because in the working groups, we're trying different concepts and different strategies to put in our digital transformation and development strategies too. I think the case of South Korea is one of the successful. For me, it's just my opinion. At the same time, of course, we are checking the cases with regulatory sandboxes that have been really useful in the UK. And when it comes to the startup systems or some projects, we also try to make the same by checking for instance, in the past, it's not have been so good regulated, unanimous, like we call it BPLA. So that's why I think that South Korea and UK cases are most useful for now.
Okay, Nikita, who do you think's doing a really good job with economic development right now?
When I writing a maybe strategy for game industry, for me is benchmark is Poland and Saudi Arabia. Why? Poland, when they started, they explained to their people that okay, into this industry and will help you to gain money, and people believe to this process. From another side, I see in Saudi Arabia, and they say, okay, government give $13 billion for 5 years, and of course, all companies around the world think, okay, Saudi Arabia can be next game dev hub in many regions. I think that is too, and maybe Azerbaijan can use that to these benchmarks, is communication with community, and there's another side for maybe like relocate maybe foreign companies to Azerbaijan. So that's why Saudi Arabia and Poland.
That's great. Hey, what do you think, Dan?
So diplomatically, I must say, I think that Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan are doing a phenomenal job.
Oh, such a great panelist.
Yes, but if I look around the world, if you think of over the past decade, which countries, which economies have made the greatest leaps in their innovation or startup ecosystems, one of them, and actually notwithstanding both of your points, South Korea, I think what they've done around culture and the export of culture is incredible, and Saudi Arabia around AI, but in both cases, those are countries who have really big suitcases full of money to throw against problems. And so you look at other economies who don't have as much capital to solve problems. Portugal, I think, is a really interesting example. Portugal, that in the early 2000s was the poorest country amongst the EU 27, was having exceptional economic difficulties, but it had this organic startup and entrepreneurial ecosystem that was born out of necessity because people didn't have jobs. And the government recognized this. They started to host events. They put in policy which incentivized entrepreneurs. They put in policy which incentivized both local and international investors. And today, they've attracted, I think the latest number is they've attracted 1 million new people into Portugal. Their startup ecosystem is one of the most vibrant in Europe, and they're growing big companies. And that over a span of a decade, I think, is a really unique example of coming somewhat from the bottom. And they're not at the top, but they're showing the roots. And in all our ecosystems, the most important thing is talent. And so you're either trying to keep your talent or get smart people to come there, and you need to match that talent with capital. And they seem to have managed to do both in a relatively short period of time. Which
Yeah,
I think is impressive.
they really have. So my favorite, not to answer my own question, that I really think is a great example is Finland, because Finland has a very strong private sector that actually supports each other. And so if you're a founder in Finland and you need to raise money, then you can go out to the private ecosystem and you're able to raise pretty easily. So they really take care of their ecosystem because they realize that if they're going to be making a new company in the sector that they're interested in, they need to be supporting that sector so that that sector is strong and they can have strong events and they can have a strong ecosystem. So I really like the Finnish just because it's something where people can do it on their own. It's like a good example of a community that was built by the private sector. Obviously, they have support from the public sector, but not to the extent of a lot of the other programs. So, yeah, that's it. Well, thank you guys for coming.
Thank
Do we have time for a question?
Yeah,
Do we?
this is my favorite. I love economic development and policy. Obviously, like that's why we did Global Tech Weekend. So,
Do we have
Thank you for sharing.
one question over here?
oh, we have lots.
Ignacio?
Thanks, John. And congratulations for a great panel. For Dan, you mentioned about like a program that was developed by the government. The program that was developed by the government that spent millions and it failed. Now, what are the reasons for why it failed? Was it lack of empathy, as you mentioned? Was it like lack of knowledge? And how easy is, so that's question number one. And then question number two is how easy is for governments to do a post-mortem on this kind of programs and, admit, okay, we effed it up big time, and, to make that public.
Let me answer the second one first because it's far easier. If it's the same political government, they don't want to. If it's a different political government, then it's very easy because you get to blame someone else. When we were building a multi-billion-dollar strategy, sometimes we would say, hey, what the old people did was really good. And then you'd get a message back that said, okay, do it, but change the name. And so, that part is, we like to learn when it's not our fault. The first question, part of it is behavioral change. Policy is about psychology, because policy in any realm, not just economic development or innovation policy, but any form of policy is about trying to drive change in people. And so the levers you have to try to incentivize someone who's used to doing something to do something different are difficult. And sometimes I think, the fault of someone like myself has been, well, but money will change the problem. If I put a financial incentive, and if I tell you that if you invest $1, I'll give you 10, that'll make you change. But what we hit in Canada, we have a research and development problem where our corporations don't invest enough in research and development to look forward. And so we built huge programs to try to address that. The problem is our companies are comfortable, or they were until February in a new American administration. And so, but we didn't change that behavior. And, so now we can look back and try to alter, but ultimately, like anything in life, psychology is the most important thing. And it's, how you address that and how you think about how much incentive does someone need. I think, unfortunately, it's an iterative process, which government isn't always very good at doing, because depending on your political system, you might do something on year one of a 4-year mandate, and then by year 2.5, someone wants to think about getting reelected, and so you can't actually adapt on what you've learned on, which is the problem with it.
All right, we do have a very quick question. We get it in there. Let's do it.
Hi. At first, thanks for the wonderful conversation. My question would be, like you mentioned, wonderful countries, wonderful examples about South Korea, United Arab Emirates, I guess. Saudi Arabia, the second one. I was wondering what your thoughts were about the Ireland's case, because for the past years they have had 8 to 10% GDP growth, I guess, and they had some wonderful incentives to attract very good investors and huge companies to remove their headquarters from the US and move them to the Ireland. And I guess that they also attracted a lot of startups. And I know that they have some huge tax breaks for the startups and also, I guess, all of the tech companies that are operating in Ireland.
Do any of you?
For you? Yeah.
I think for anybody, I can start, or if you want to start.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, Ireland's a really interesting case because they went zero tax to do exactly what you just said, to attract in particular headquarters. You know, there's a whole bunch of, from an outside perspective, one might look at that and say, is this a race to the bottom? Because if we all go to zero tax, then someone's going to get left holding a bag of that isn't very nice. But it's worked. It attracted headquarters. It attracted a very little bit of revenue. It didn't create jobs, though. And so what they're banking on is that by attracting headquarters, by attracting some companies, in particular for head office, because I know Canadian companies who've set up a head office in Ireland, but they don't put people there. They put, well, they put the minimum amount of people to satisfy a tax regulation, but they're not growing there. And so the question is there a spin-off that if an executive from a big American handset company has an office and spends a couple weeks there a year, does that kind of create an impact in an ecosystem? And I think, you know, broaden it beyond Ireland, like all of these events like this, where you're bringing people from around the world, and it's all the hope is that a whole bunch of people here who live in Georgia and Tbilisi are gonna think about what some random people from around the world have said and get smarter and do better things than we have. And so that type of exchange and attraction is positive. Whether it makes economic sense, I don't know.
I agree with Dan, actually, is that, you know, why I said about maybe Saudi Arabia or maybe Poland, because we must understand maybe some culture, maybe aspects, of course, because, okay, I can see to maybe Silicon Valley, and of course, we in Azerbaijan, we never can cooperate Silicon Valley in Baku. This is impossible. We need build anything own. So maybe Azerbaijan Valley, we have some kind of strategy. Absheron Valley, it's not will be a copyright of Silicon Valley. In gaming industry, we think, okay, we have maybe same economic points. It's the same with Poland. From maybe culture aspects, we have maybe some same points in Saudi Arabia. That's why we think maybe social economic aspects, and that's why we are choosing maybe some benchmarks or maybe countries where we see. We have a very big neighbor, Turkey, with very great game industry, but Turkey is not as our benchmark. In Turkey is increasing a number of mobile game studios. In Azerbaijan, we have much more in PC gaming. It's not our benchmark. That's why we need maybe all aspects, analysis for building maybe some policy.
That's a great question, great answers, and a great, great panel. We really appreciate you guys.
Thank you guys. Thank you.
All. Give them love. Give them love. Thank you all so, so much.